HID for USB, they said, well, what about a BIOS of a PC? How are we going to boot up? Are we going to expect that BIOS vendors are going to have a complete USB stack? Probably not. So what they did was they came up with this boot protocol, which has these fixed reports, not flexible reports. And there are fixed reports defined for keyboards, simple keyboards and 2-axis mice, and that's it. Any variation on that requires report protocol. But boot protocol is a fixed reporting mechanism to be used, that is used between keyboards and a BIOS. It can be used by the operating system once you boot up, optionally. These are both defined in the HID specification with the idea that boot protocol is available for BIOSes to use. Bluetooth specifies something called boot mode, which is an extension of this idea. When you're in boot mode, when a device is in boot mode, or in particular when a dongle is in boot mode talking to a device, it's using the boot protocol to talk to the device. And it's also probably using USB emulation. So what it does is it tells the host computer, hey, I'm a USB keyboard. It doesn't tell it, I'm a Bluetooth adapter. It doesn't tell it anything about there being Bluetooth connected to the system. It's just saying, I'm a USB keyboard and a USB mouse, in the case of this one, because it's a little dongle that ships with both a keyboard and a mouse. It just basically fools the system, and that allows a boot time. A BIOS doesn't have to have any kind of knowledge of Bluetooth whatsoever. I'm going to show you just a real quick demo here. If I look at my USB bus, you'll see the devices I have on it. I'm going to pop in this little dongle that came with the keyboard and look at my bus again. And there you see those top 3 lines are the dongle. It's actually enumerated itself as 3 devices. It's enumerated itself as a keyboard, as a mouse, and as a dongle. And if I do an HCI config, you'll see I have no HCI Bluetooth devices at all. But if I use the HID to HCI utility that comes with BlueZ, I can switch the thing over to HCI mode, and then you can see, oh, now I have a Bluetooth device attached, right? So unless the user or the host operating system makes the effort to put the thing into HCI mode, it's always going to default to boot mode where it's doing USB emulation. And this happens a lot. You put the dongle into the computer, and let's say, for example, you put it into a computer that doesn't have a Bluetooth stack, or it has a Bluetooth stack, but it doesn't actually support the HID profile. And there's a very famous stack that doesn't support the HID profile, and that's the one that ships with Windows XP. So if you plug this thing into a Windows XP computer and you never install the third-party stack that probably came on a CD with your keyboard, then you're probably running this thing in boot mode all the time. So I was playing with this particular one last year as I was working on the GR Bluetooth project, and I captured a waveform of this keyboard, and here's a spectrogram of it. And then I was working on this Wireshark Bluetooth baseband plugin, which is now a part of the GR Bluetooth project. So it's this plugin for Wireshark that dissects baseband. And by the way, Dominic Spill, who is unable to be here today, did put out a new release of GR Bluetooth this morning. So some fresh codes out there for you all. The interesting thing I noted is this is actually the capture I was using when I was developing this, and I was going down through the packet one field at a time, and I'm getting closer and closer to this payload at the bottom, and I'm going, oh my goodness, there isn't very much entropy there. Realized that this was taken with a USRP and entirely passive monitoring, with no knowledge of the device's addresses, no knowledge of any link keys, just completely blind passive monitoring. And here I get to the bottom, and I have a completely clear text HID report. And this is a boot mode report And you can see in the middle of that string of mostly zeros, there's the character 1C, and that's the particular letter that was typed. That represents, that 1 byte represents the particular letter that was typed on the keyboard. And so I was talking to Josh Wright about this last year, and he said, "Wow, that's great. I can't believe that nobody's done this before. We should have a tool that allows us to actually pull these keystrokes out of these captured files." And he said, "Tell you what, you send me some captures, and I'll write the tool." And I said, "Are you kidding me? Of course I'll send you some captures." And thus btpp was born. With this tool, all you do is just point it at a pcap file, which is the file that's produced by GR Bluetooth and what we're dissecting in Wireshark, and it just pulls the keystrokes out. And this is also in the GR Bluetooth tree. So realize that this particular situation, we're in boot mode. Now, not all dongles and keyboards are going to end up communicating in the clear in boot mode, but many do. How do you test that? How do you know whether your keyboard's actually using encryption or not? And I'll be talking about that later. But one way you can do with the more expensive hardware is to use the GR Bluetooth, just like I just shown. But I'm going to show how to use off-the-shelf dongles to learn the same kind of thing. So be careful of boot mode. Boot mode is not going to behave the same way as normal HCI mode. You're losing your control that your host operating system has over your Bluetooth device by operating in boot mode. You might be able to avoid boot mode entirely. Like if you replace your dongle with a regular dongle that doesn't have a connect button, it probably won't support boot mode. And your keyboard will only work when your host operating system is booted up. That might work for you in some situations. Although I warn you, more and more Bluetooth host adapters, including some that ship internally in laptops, actually default to boot mode. So they start out, even if you never configure them or never install any Bluetooth software, you might have a laptop that is just waiting for a keyboard to connect to it at any time. So look out for those. One of the things that we could do if we have just plain off-the-shelf dongles and HCI layer tools is to try connecting to a device directly. That means connecting to the keyboard. And you can initiate a connection to that keyboard if you have its address. You can initiate a connection to the keyboard while spoofing the host's address if you also have the host address. And if you also have a third thing, the link key that's shared between the host and the device, then you can really do a good job of spoofing even the authentication and participate in authentication and encryption with that keyboard, just like you're the legitimate host. So those are sort of three things that might be nice to find. And we can initiate an active connection to a keyboard, or we can just listen. We can just set things up so that we're pretending to be the host and waiting for the keyboard to come talk to us. In most situations, I like to initiate an outgoing connection. It gives you more control over what's going on. But there are situations where a keyboard might be more inclined to talk to you. And it isn't always clear which is the keyboard is expecting. We can do the exact same things connecting to a host, potentially pretending to be the device, pretending to be the keyboard. And just that was done some years ago by Colin Mulliner. Some of you may have seen his hit attack and this XKBD BTHID, which is a little on-screen keyboard that he wrote for his little mobile device so that he could pretend to be a Bluetooth keyboard and control other things. And he was interested in finding stacks, host operating systems that had a vulnerability where they're just waiting for a keyboard to connect. And I believe those, other than boot mode dongles, I believe those holes have all been closed to my knowledge, but I don't know if anyone's done a real comprehensive survey. But these tools can also be used to spoof a real device. And I'm going to show you a quick little demo In this case, I'm not using, I'm gonna switch my projector here over to my victim machine.